Christian Parenting.
I do not regularly go onto YouTube except to check my episodes, make sure everything uploaded okay. But a recommended video popped up when I was doing that one day, and let me tell you, these algorithms, they are getting pretty good. And I was curious, so I watched it. Then I sent it in our family group chat, and my daughter replied back at some point. I think it was in person. She didn't reply back to the text, but just said, this video explains you and Dad a little bit more. You guys make a little bit more sense. But there was something else in the video that really stuck out and really stuck with me. And I hadn't realized that I was actually doing this in the homeschooling of our kids. And I look back and I'm so glad. It wasn't necessarily super intentional, but just this video just made me kind of think like, okay, that was a good thing. And now with 3 graduates, I can look back and say, yes, whether all of it was intentional or not, I'm glad that I did that. And today I want to share with you how you should let your homeschool child earn their education. My hope is that what I'm going to share today, that you then figure out how does that translate and how does it look in your homeschool. Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast. This is episode 469. We have a lot of episodes that have been going on. My name is Leigh and I am the host here, and super blessed that you are here and joining me on what's probably a very hot summer day. Here we are, mid-July. I cannot believe the summer is just flying by. I pray that you have been able to make some connections with your kids. Maybe it's just running through the sprinkler, or it's been so hot and you are having a family game night inside with maybe some chocolate chip cookies, and maybe that you bought at the store because it's too hot to heat up the house with the oven going. But I just pray that it is a good summer. It is a reprieve for your heart and your mind and your body as you are in between homeschool years, and even if you homeschool year round. I think a lot of you that do that kind of take the summer a little bit different and a little bit easier. And yeah, anyway, I just really hope that you are having a good summer, and let's now dive into this episode. Now, I am going to link that YouTube video in the show notes, but no. Don't stop and pause this episode here and then go watch that. I want you to listen to this, because I think that after you hear what I have to say, when you watch that video, it will make more of an impact and you'll understand the points that I am trying to make about it, and maybe kind of downplay some of the other parts of the video. And it should be fine to watch around your kids, but I don't remember everything. I don't think it's inappropriate, but maybe just in case, you just never know. And sometimes ads kind of pop up and stuff like that you're like, oh, wow, okay, there we go. But I'm going to link that in the show notes for you to watch afterwards. Let me give you a couple of, let me just say that in the video, it is talking about different generations. And we all love to hear about our own generation and think that our own generation is best. Now, I am Gen X. The video is about Gen X. So, of course, I was like, this makes so much sense. This is why. And generalizations can be kind of fun. They can kind of point out some things, but they aren't always true when it comes to an entire population. Boomers, they get a bad rap. And then, of course, Gen Z can get a bad rap for having their head in a phone or something like that. But it does kind of go into that, and it really can appeal to us. Now, I was born in 1976, so therefore, technically, towards the end of Gen X, I didn't realize that Gen X was like that big of that many years, I would say. And I was like, oh, okay, so I am more of a baby Gen X, but really felt the full effects of it. Now, in the video, they will talk a lot about latchkey kids. I have to say, from my experience, I knew a lot of my friends who went home and their parents were not there because both of their parents worked. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So therefore, when I came home, whether it was kindergarten, 6th grade, or 12th grade, my mom was present. She was there in the home. I can remember distinctly walking into the house every single day and looking over, and she'd be in the kitchen. Now, this would probably be closer to like 4 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So she would be working on dinner prep, and she was just there. So that is not my experience. And so when we watch things that have to do with specific generations, you have probably seen it too. You're like, well, that doesn't really apply to me. But I think that overall, just that pervasiveness of the latchkey kids, I think it just kind of caught on to a lot of us. And you really can become a product of the overall environment. So that would be my caveat, that I was not a latchkey kid and that there's generalizations, but that's not necessarily always applicable to all. Okay, so let's get into the meat of this episode, and then you can go ahead and watch that video. I think it's like 10 minutes. I always watch everything on at least 1.5 speed, so it doesn't take 10 minutes. And there are like cartoon images, but they're not necessarily necessary. You could just listen to it like you're listening to this podcast. You don't necessarily have to watch it. All right, so the crux of the impact of the video was more so for me at the end. And I think that part can be easily missed and overlooked because if you are Gen X, which maybe some of you are, I believe, I'm pretty sure most of you are millennials that listen to this episode just because of the age of your kids. But if you are Gen X and you're watching it, you're like, oh, yeah, you can very easily miss what I think is like the most important part of that and how we can apply that to our homeschool. And that was more so towards the end of the video. And so this video overall made me realize how before our current technology, we had to work and we had to earn our education. In the video, they'll say we had to go to the card catalog, we had to get out books, we had to earn it. I'm going to share a direct quote from the video, and it's really going to set the pace for the rest of this episode. The narrator said, "When information costs you something to obtain, your brain holds it more permanently." It's true. I mean, that's just scientifically true. And even it could just be, just from observation of your own life. Stop and think. The things that you had to figure out and you had to obtain that information, it cost you something. It cost you time. It might have cost you money. It cost you energy. You will then remember that. Just like think of the things that when you do something wrong, you get something wrong, you mess up, you break something, it doesn't go quite right. You're like, oh, that actually makes more of an impact upon you than if you were to get it right the first time. So let me read that to you again one more time. When information costs you something to obtain, your brain holds it more permanently. Let's start that end part. Your brain holding it more permanently. We want our kids to remember things. Obviously, they're not going to remember everything. For me, in school, there was a lot with history. I didn't enjoy history because it wasn't told as a story and didn't flow if you study, let's just say, for example, World War I, there's a lot of different things coming into play. And we can look back now and say, oh, this is going on in this country, and this is going on with this people group, and all of this, and this is what happened before. No, instead they were like, memorize these generals and these dates and these battles, and that was it. But when you actually hear the story, you're like, oh, this makes so much more sense, and I'm so much more interested in it. And your brain is then going to hold that better. When it would come to the tests, regurgitate as many dates and numbers you can remember, and I don't remember a single one after that, and you're probably the same way. We want our kids to remember things, but we obviously know they can't remember everything. Maybe you've got a little genius who can they have a photographic memory and can remember everything. Great. But most people are not like that. We need to help train their brains. And in order to do that, if we make the fact that getting that information is going to cost them something to obtain it, it's going to hold it better and more permanently, and they'll be able to build upon that knowledge. And that's why I'm saying in this episode, let your homeschool child earn their education. Don't just put it out there. Don't just give it to them on a silver platter and provide them with everything and every resource that they could ever imagine. To be honest, I am really glad that for most of our homeschool years, we were strapped for cash. The budget was very small because I had to do a lot with a little bit. And therefore, I had to get creative and they had to actually earn their education a bit more. I couldn't just provide them with everything to make it easy. So that's kind of where I'm coming at. Let's not make their education easy. Let's make them earn their education. They might not like it at the time. I have an episode coming up about kids who aren't enthusiastic about school, and we'll get into that. But they might not always appreciate the time, but that is okay. Just remember. Okay, so how does this translate into homeschool? You get to decide the level of help with every single subject. Now, I'm not saying you have to just give your kids a bunch of math worksheets with no lessons. That would be foolish. That would be silly, especially as you get to the higher math. But maybe there's some things that they just have to figure out on their own. And maybe it's you guys working together, doing family style learning. But you have the opportunity, when kids are in school, I assume, that they all have to get a Chromebook, at least when I had heard that they were coming out with those. They can't reject those Chromebooks that are mandatory in school, but you get to reject some things. You don't have to say that certain ways and helps of learning is mandatory. You can reject that. So again, when information costs you something to obtain, your brain holds it more permanently. It's okay for your kids to struggle. Even with that math lesson, I remember looking over and them just kind of struggling with it. And I would say, do you need some help? And they would say a lot of the times in the very beginning, at least I wouldn't let them go too long because then you just become frustrated and you're not even thinking. They got to the point that they would just be, this is in high school even, and say, no, or this is at least when they're younger too, like, no, I'm going to figure this out. Awesome. That is so good. Now, again, don't want them to struggle where they're at the point of tears, and you might just look over and say, it looks like you're just kind of stuck right here. What if you did this instead? Oh, okay. And sometimes like kids will get mad and be like, no, don't tell me. I want to figure this out. Because they just intrinsically knew. They could see that by struggling a little bit, that just made it more permanent in their brain. And as an adult, struggle is just a part of our life. Instead of coming to their rescue every single time that they are struggling, let them push through. Obviously, this is not in dangerous situations or anything like that. I don't think doing their math work is going to be dangerous. But obviously, outside of the home education and the formal academics, we wouldn't want them just to struggle with something that's going to possibly lead to, life or limb being injured, something like that. But when it came to my homeschool philosophy, I wanted them to earn their knowledge. Now, this doesn't mean that we never did a quick Google search or watched some videos. I'm not saying that this has to be against technology, and it's not even always just technology. I mean, it can be like when you watch the video. Us in Gen X had to go to the card catalog. I don't even know if there is a card catalog, but teach kids how to use a library, how to figure it out, and actually get that information. Maybe they want to know something like random. What about something about hawks or bald eagles or certain fish or who knows what it is? Instead of saying, let's find a video on it, you could say, all right, let's write that down. And when we go to the library, we're going to find some books. They might have to search through an entire book. I'm not thinking that this is like any type of thick book or anything, just like in the library section for maybe elementary age kids and they want to learn something, say, about identifying certain trees. And they might have to comb through that entire 20, 30 page book to be able to find their answer. That's what I'm saying is them earning their education. Because along the way, guess what happens? As they are reading through that 20 to 30 pages to find that little nugget of information that they want, they've actually built a lot, like a solid foundation in a lot of other information around that one little nugget that they are looking for, that one answer that they want. Now they know the bigger picture. They would know, all right, let's go back to the hawks. They want to know specifically something about how maybe they eat or how their talons work. But they had to read through all of this, and so now they know. Maybe they want to know what they eat. Well, now they know how their talons work and where they actually live and how long maybe it takes for them to hatch out of their eggs and just all that information. They might not have thought that they were interested in that, but that one little question has then translated into them knowing a lot about something, because oftentimes when they have a question about one little part of something, they don't mind learning about the bigger whole of it. So again, going back to how this carried into my homeschool philosophy, it didn't mean we never did any quick Google searches or watch videos, but the information that stuck with them was what they learned through reading, research, and investigation. Write that down. Reading, research, investigation. A lot of kids know a lot about science from investigation. They can tell you all kinds of things about worms because they've been studying them. They might not have watched one video about it or read any book, but they have been studying those worms and they can tell you all about it. Which leads me into, I'm going to share just with you from each of my kids, just something little that I made them earn their education in, whether it was through reading, research, or investigation. And I'm going to give you their age and just how I see that actually now playing out in their life and how they had to do this just in homeschool. And this isn't always, before I get into that, this isn't always the formal academics. This often translates into just everyday life. when it could be something like cooking or something outside or something about history, and one question leads into another. Sometimes it's just, Mom, I was thinking about this. You're like, oh, okay, I did not know that you were thinking about that. Okay, all right, not quite sure where you heard that little bit, but yes, let's go ahead and do it. It can translate into hobbies and just things that they are curious about. So let me start with my 18-year-old. He spent a lot of time taking things apart, putting things together, and from trial and error, I could say that he could probably fix most things, whether it is something big on a car or a computer or an alarm clock. He just has figured out how to do those things because of trial and error. Sometimes, let me just say that those things that he has worked on, there have been some fires. Some have been on purpose, some on accident, but just from that trial and error, from that investigation, then that information that maybe about how maybe a certain motor works, you might see that certain motor in different types of machines and say, oh, okay, that's how that works. And so through investigation, he learned a lot, and he is using all of that information now today. My 21-year-old, he can spit out car facts. I'm just like, what? Now, it started off with some very high-end cars that he would learn a lot about. He would get magazines, and let me add that before he was allowed to look through the magazine, it would come in the mail, and he knew he had to put it at my seat at the dining room table. I would go through it sometimes mostly because there was ads in the back that were not appropriate. And so I would then go through and rip out some pages or get a Sharpie and block out some stuff, and then he would devour that magazine. And he had multiple subscriptions and lots of books, and he would just devour them. And he can tell you now car facts about all kinds of things. He still really enjoys that stuff. I mean, it's not what he's doing it's just kind of an area of interest, but he's just built upon that knowledge. There's also another thing about frogs and toads. He was obsessed with them. And recently he sent a picture in our family group text, and I was like, oh, look at that frog. He's like, no, it's actually a toad, and it's a certain kind of toad. And I laughed out loud because it was just funny, because he was really into that in, say, like the young tween teen years, and here he is 21. And so now my 23-year-old, she is constantly correcting me on my flower recognition, and she can remember all of it because she was just so into flowers. And then she would press the flowers, but also it was when we took our trip to Prince Edward Island, and there were specific butterflies she saw, and she's constantly telling me the kind of butterfly it is. And then I'm always saying things like, oh, look at that butterfly. And she's like, no, Mom, that's a moth. I'm like, oh, okay. And this is how you identify a butterfly. This is how you identify a moth. So these are just kind of fun things that they just did on their own in their education, and they had to earn that education. I was not going to learn all of those car facts. I was not going to learn everything that needed to be known about frogs and toads. I was not going to learn how to fix all of those motors and all of those different things. I like flowers and that kind of stuff, but I can't remember the names, and I can't remember all of the different parts of a butterfly, but she can. And so I was busy doing all the other things behind the scenes and, cooking the meals and all that kind of stuff. But making them earn that education, they still remember that stuff now. And as we wrap this up, I want to ask you a question. Why? Why make them earn their education? I've got an answer for you. Because they acquire competency, and they acquire I don't know if this is a word, but a figure-outable. You have to figure it out. And sometimes we know as adults, no one's coming to help us as an adult. We have to figure it out. This helps prepare their mind, their brains. I believe that the kids who have to earn maybe all or part of their education, that their brains are going to be well equipped for all of the things that adulthood is going to throw at them. But this prepares them for adulthood by shaping their brains now. I'm going to read that quote one more time. When information costs you something to obtain, your brain holds it more permanently. And we all know from experience that oftentimes when you get into a room with people and you actually learn things directly instead of somebody just kind of having to say it, and when your full body is immersed in the experience, then it really sticks with you. You're going to get to do that at Little by Little Homeschool Conference. Tickets are now on sale. The event is actually just about 2 months away, which I'm like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. We are so excited. Jamie Erickson and Elizabeth Urbanowitz are coming to share with us, and I will be sharing as well. We've got a full day packed. You can check out more at littlebylittlehomeschool.com/conference, but I would encourage you to get your ticket now so we can have those numbers and get that all figured out. You know, we want it to be very figure-outable. And tickets will not be on sale up until that day. I haven't quite figured it out, but early September. So the time clock is ticking down. So go ahead and get your ticket, and along with that, let your homeschool child earn their education.